What if I told you that a single cup of coffee destroyed 3 people's lives in less than 10 minutes? What if I told you that a waitress being slammed face down on a table by police officers turned out to be the daughter of one of the richest men in America? And what if I told you that a 15-year-old girl with a trembling phone recorded every single second of it, and that video changed everything? This is not a made-up story. This is about Isabella Rodriguez. And before I tell you what happened that Tuesday morning in a small cafe, I need you to understand something. This story will make you angry, it will break your heart, but by the end, it will restore your faith and courage. Because sometimes the most powerful people in the world are standing right in front of us, wearing a waitress uniform, and we don't even notice. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear is one of those rare true stories that proves that one moment of cruelty can ignite a revolution, and one act of bravery from a teenage girl can change an entire country. This is the story of the day everything changed. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes the most powerful people in the world are standing right in front of us, and we don't even notice. We judge them by their uniform, by the color of their skin, by where they work. And that's exactly what happened on one ordinary Tuesday morning in Riverside, a small town where everyone thought they knew everyone else's business. Let me tell you about Isabella Rodriguez. To everyone at Maple Street Cafe, she was just another waitress trying to make ends meet. She wore the same simple uniform as the other servers, tied her hair back in a neat ponytail, and smiled politely even when customers were rude. Nobody knew that this 23-year-old woman wiping down tables was actually the daughter of Vincent Rodriguez, one of the wealthiest tech billionaires in America. Why was she there? Because Isabella wanted something her father's money could never buy. A real understanding of how ordinary people lived. She'd grown up in mansions, attended private schools, and never had to worry about bills. But she felt disconnected, like she was living in a bubble. So one day, she told her father she wanted to experience life without the privilege, without the name, without the safety net. He was terrified, but he understood. He gave her just one condition. She had to wear a small tracking device, hidden in her apron, that would alert his security team if she was ever in danger. Isabella had been working at the cafe for 3 months, and she loved it. Sure, the work was hard. Her feet ached after long shifts, and some customers treated her like she was invisible. But she also met amazing people, heard their stories, and felt like she was finally seeing the real world. She sent her father messages every few days, telling him she was learning more about life in this diner than she ever did in any classroom. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the small cafe, and the regular customers were already settling into their favorite booths. Isabella moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling coffee cups and taking orders with a warm smile. Then the door opened and everything changed. A woman walked in, and you could feel the shift in the air immediately. She wore expensive designer clothes, carried a handbag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and had that look on her face like the world owed her something. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her high heels clicked sharply against the cafe floor as she strutted to a booth. Isabella approached her table with the same friendly greeting she gave everyone. "Good morning. Welcome to Maple Street Cafe. What can I get started for you today?" The woman didn't even look up from her phone. She waved her hand dismissively, like she was shooing away a fly. "It's too cold in here. Turn up the heat." Isabella kept her smile in place. "I'm sorry, but I don't control the thermostat. I can ask my manager if you'd like." "Of course you can't," the woman muttered, finally looking up with cold eyes. "What can you even do? Just bring me a skinny vanilla latte with almond milk and make it fast." Isabella's heart sank a little, but she'd dealt with difficult customers before. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're a diner. We serve regular coffee, but we don't have espresso machines or almond milk. I can offer you regular coffee with cream, or we have orange juice and—" "Are you serious right now?" The woman's voice cut through the quiet cafe like a knife. Several customers turned to look. What kind of pathetic place is this? You can't even make a simple latte. Isabella felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "I apologize for the inconvenience. This is a traditional American diner. We serve breakfast foods, sandwiches, and regular coffee. I'd be happy to recommend." "Don't tell me what you serve. The woman stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Now everyone in the cafe was watching. I know exactly what your problem is. You people think you can talk back to customers, act like you're better than you are. Well, I know important people. Very important people. Isabella's hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together to hide it. She'd experienced discrimination before, subtle comments, suspicious looks, but this felt different. More dangerous. Ma'am, I'm just trying to help you find something on our menu that. I don't need help from someone like you, the woman spat. Then her eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. Wait a minute. I've seen you before. Weren't you at the Horizon Foundation Gala last month? The charity event hosted by Vincent Rodriguez. Isabella's blood ran cold. She had been at that event, but as a guest, wearing an evening gown and standing beside her father as he gave a speech about education funding. She'd hoped no one from that world would recognize her here, in her simple waitress uniform. She tried to recover quickly. I helped serve at several charity events. Maybe you saw me there. But the woman wasn't buying it. Her expression shifted from anger to something more calculating, more cruel. No, that's not it. You said something, didn't you? You said Vincent Rodriguez is your friend, or something ridiculous like that. Are you threatening me? Are you pretending to know billionaires? I never said that, Isabella replied quietly, her heart pounding. I just said I recognized you from. She's threatening me, the woman suddenly shouted to the entire cafe. This waitress is making up lies about knowing rich people and threatening me. Someone call the police. And in that moment, as Isabella stood there feeling the weight of every eye in the room judging her, she realized something heartbreaking. No matter what she said, no one would believe her. Because when you're wearing a waitress uniform and you're a young woman of color, people don't see your truth. They see their assumptions. The woman pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm calling the cops right now. People like you need to learn your place. Isabella wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted to tell them all who she really was. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the realization that this was the exact reality she'd wanted to understand. This was what life was like for people without power, without protection, without a famous name to hide behind. So she stood there, waiting, as the woman's call connected, and the worst morning of her life was about to get so much worse. Have you ever felt completely helpless? Like no matter what you say, no matter how much you try to explain, nobody will listen? That's exactly where Isabella found herself as 3 police officers walked through the cafe door just minutes after that woman made her call. The atmosphere in Maple Street Cafe had turned thick with tension. The regular customers, people who'd been coming here for years, some who'd chatted with Isabella dozens of times, now sat frozen in their seats. They watched but said nothing. The manager, a middle-aged man named Tom who'd always been kind to Isabella, stood behind the counter wringing his hands nervously but didn't step forward to defend her. Everyone had become spectators to her humiliation. The officer who led the group was tall, broad-shouldered, with a stern face that showed no warmth or curiosity. His name tag read Officer Brennan. He walked straight up to Isabella with his hand resting on his belt, near his weapon, as if she posed some kind of threat. The 2 officers behind him fanned out, blocking the exit. We got a call about a disturbance, Brennan said, his voice hard and suspicious. Someone making threats? The blonde woman rushed forward before Isabella could even open her mouth. Her whole demeanor had shifted. Now she was playing the victim, her voice shaking dramatically. Officer, thank God you're here. This waitress, she's been harassing me. She claimed to know Vincent Rodriguez, the billionaire, and said she would have him ruin my life. I felt threatened. I was scared for my safety. Isabella's mouth fell open in shock. That's not true at all. I never said anything like that. She asked if I'd seen her before, and I mentioned I'd worked at a charity event, that's all. I didn't threaten anyone. But Officer Brennan wasn't interested in her explanation. His eyes swept over her dismissively, taking in her worn uniform, her simple appearance, and Isabella could see the judgment forming before he even spoke. ID now. Her hands shook as she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her wallet. She handed him her driver's license, and for a moment, she wondered if he'd recognize the name. Rodriguez wasn't uncommon, but her address was listed in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the state. Would he notice? Would he question it? He barely glanced at it before handing it back. You work here? Yes, sir. I've been working here for 3 months. I haven't done anything wrong. This lady came in angry from the start, and when I couldn't make her a specialty coffee, She got upset and, "So you're admitting you refused to serve her?" Brennan interrupted. "No. I explained that we don't have espresso machines here. It's a diner. I offered her alternatives, but—" "She's lying," the blonde woman interjected, her voice rising. "She got aggressive with me. She said her billionaire friend would make sure I regretted coming here." Those were her exact words. Isabella felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Please, you can ask anyone here." They all heard what really happened. But when Officer Brennan turned to survey the cafe, not a single person spoke up. They all looked away, suddenly fascinated by their coffee cups, their phones, the pattern on the tablecloth. Anything to avoid getting involved. Except for one person. In the back corner booth, a teenage girl named Riley sat with her mother. Riley was 15 years old, with bright, intelligent eyes and a phone clutched in her trembling hands. She'd been recording since the moment the blonde woman started yelling. She'd captured everything. The false accusations, Isabella's calm responses, the way the woman's story kept changing. Riley's mother had whispered urgently for her to put the phone away, to not get involved, but Riley couldn't. Something about watching this waitress being treated so unfairly made her stomach turn. Her own older sister had been harassed by police last year, and nobody had defended her either. So Riley kept recording, her phone partially hidden behind her water glass, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Back at the counter, things were getting worse for Isabella. Officer Brennan grabbed her arm, his grip unnecessarily tight. "I think you need to come with us and calm down." "Calm down. I am calm. I'm trying to explain what actually happened." Isabella's voice cracked slightly. She could feel the situation spiraling out of control. "Don't resist," Brennan warned, and suddenly he was pushing her toward the nearest table, bending her forward roughly. Isabella gasped as her ribs hit the edge of the table. Pain shot through her side. "Stop! You're hurting me. I haven't done anything." "She's resisting arrest," the blonde woman called out, as if she were narrating a sports game. "Did you see that? She tried to pull away." Isabella hadn't pulled away. She'd simply tried to protect herself from being slammed into the furniture. But the truth didn't seem to matter anymore. Officer Brennan pressed her face down against the cold table surface, and Isabella felt humiliation burn through her entire body. The other officers moved closer, surrounding her, making her feel small and powerless and afraid. "Please," she whispered, her cheek pressed painfully against the table. "My father, he's—" "Your father?" Brennan laughed cruelly. "What's your father going to do? Let me guess, he's friends with the mayor? He's a lawyer? Save your lies for someone who cares." Isabella felt something break inside her chest. Not her spirit, but her faith in the system, her faith that truth mattered, that justice existed for everyone equally. Because in this moment, she realized what millions of people already knew. When you don't look like you have power, when you don't dress like you have money, when your skin is darker than what some people expect, your words mean nothing. Your truth is invisible. The officers pulled out handcuffs, the metal cold against her wrists, and Isabella's mind raced to her father. She thought about the tracking device in her apron. Had it been activated? Would he know she was in trouble? Or would she be dragged to a police station, humiliated further, before anyone realized what had happened? The blonde woman stood nearby, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. "This is what happens when people forget their place," she said quietly, just loud enough for Isabella to hear. And in that moment, Isabella understood exactly what her father had always tried to protect her from. Not just physical danger, but the soul-crushing experience of being treated as less than human, simply because people assumed they knew who you were based on how you looked. But what nobody in that cafe knew, what the officers couldn't possibly imagine, was that Isabella's small tracking device had indeed activated the moment Officer Brennan first grabbed her arm. And 15 miles away, in a private office on the top floor of Rodriguez Technologies, alarms were blaring, security teams were mobilizing, and Vincent Rodriguez, one of the most powerful men in the country, was about to turn this small town upside down to reach his daughter. The storm was coming. They just didn't know it yet. Let me tell you what was happening in those crucial minutes while Isabella was being handcuffed in that small cafe, while customers looked away in shame, while a teenage girl named Riley kept her phone recording with shaking hands. 15 miles away, Vincent Rodriguez was in a board meeting discussing the launch of a new educational software platform. He was focused, confident, doing what he did best, building technology that would change lives. Then his phone buzzed with an alert he'd hoped he'd never see. An alert he'd specifically programmed himself when Isabella insisted on working in the real world without protection. Emergency. Distress signal activated. Location. Maple Street Cafe, Riverside. Vincent's blood turned to ice. He knew his daughter. She wouldn't activate that signal unless something was seriously wrong. She was strong, independent, stubborn just like him. For her to trigger that emergency beacon meant she was in real danger. He didn't excuse himself from the meeting. He didn't explain anything to the confused executives around the table. He simply stood up, grabbed his phone, and said one word to his assistant. Now. Within minutes, a level of chaos descended on Riverside that the small town had never experienced. Vincent's private security team, trained by former military personnel and equipped with resources most police departments could only dream of, mobilized immediately. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows roared out of the Rodriguez Technologies headquarters. A helicopter lifted off from the building's private helipad. And Vincent himself sat in the lead vehicle, his jaw clenched tight, his mind cycling through every terrible possibility. He'd been against this from the start. When Isabella told him she wanted to experience life as an ordinary person, every protective instinct in his body had screamed no. But he'd also understood. He'd grown up poor himself, worked his way up from nothing, and he knew the disconnect that wealth created. He'd seen it in other billionaires' children, spoiled and disconnected from reality, and he'd been terrified Isabella would become like them. So he'd agreed, but only with that tracking device. Only with that promise that he could reach her if she needed him. And now she needed him. Back at the cafe, Isabella was being pulled toward the door, the handcuffs digging into her wrists. Tears finally escaped her eyes, not from physical pain, but from the devastating realization of how easily a person's dignity could be stripped away. How quickly assumptions could become accusations could become arrests, and the truth could be completely ignored. Wait! A young voice suddenly rang out across the cafe. Everyone turned. Riley had stood up from her booth, her phone held high, her voice trembling but determined. I recorded everything. She didn't threaten anyone. That lady is lying. Officer Brennan's face darkened. Sit down, kid. Recording officers is obstruction. No, it's not. Riley's mother tried to pull her daughter back down, terrified, but Riley shook her head. It's my First Amendment right. And you're hurting her for no reason. Riley, please, her mother whispered urgently. Don't get involved. But Riley couldn't sit down. Wouldn't sit down. She looked at Isabella's tear-stained face and saw her own sister. Saw every person who'd ever been treated unfairly, and something inside her refused to be silent. The video shows everything. She was polite the whole time. That woman started yelling first. The blonde woman's face went pale, then red with fury. That girl is lying too. She's probably friends with the waitress. I've never met her before in my life, Riley said, her voice stronger now. But I know wrong when I see it. And this is wrong. For a moment, just a brief moment, Officer Brennan hesitated. Maybe it was the conviction in Riley's voice, or maybe it was the realization that a recording existed that could contradict their report. But before he could respond, before anyone could say another word, a sound filled the air that made everyone freeze. The deep, rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades. People rushed to the windows. Outside, the morning sky had darkened with the shadow of an approaching helicopter. Then came the vehicles, 3 massive black SUVs racing down Main Street at speeds that seemed impossible in a small town with a 25 miles per hour limit. They screeched to a halt outside the cafe, and car doors flew open. Isabella felt Officer Brennan's grip loosen slightly on her arm. She looked up, her vision blurred with tears, and saw him. Her father. Vincent Rodriguez stepped out of the lead vehicle, and even from inside the cafe, even through her fear and pain, Isabella could see the fury radiating from him like heat. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in casual clothes because he'd been working from home that morning. But his presence, his energy, the way he moved with absolute purpose and authority, made it clear this was not an ordinary man. Behind him came 6 security personnel in tactical gear, communicating through earpieces, moving with military precision. Vincent strode toward the cafe entrance, and 2 of his security team pushed the door open before he even reached it. The little bell above the door that usually chimed so cheerfully now sounded almost ominous in the heavy silence. Every eye in that cafe turned to Vincent Rodriguez. The customers who'd been watching Isabella's humiliation suddenly looked nervous. The manager behind the counter went pale, recognizing the face he'd seen on business magazines and news programs. The blonde woman's confident smirk vanished completely, replaced by confusion and growing fear. But Vincent only had eyes for his daughter. "Isabella," he said, and his voice cracked on her name. Officer Brennan finally seemed to understand that something was very, very wrong. "Sir, you need to step back. This is a police matter." Vincent's head turned slowly toward the officer, and the look in his eyes made Brennan take an involuntary step backward. "That," Vincent said quietly, dangerously, "is my daughter. And you have exactly 5 seconds to take those handcuffs off her before I make it my life's mission to ensure you never wear that badge again." You know that moment when the entire world shifts? When everything you thought you knew suddenly rearranges itself into a completely different picture. That's what happened in Maple Street Cafe when Vincent Rodriguez identified Isabella as his daughter. Officer Brennan's face went through a series of changes: confusion, disbelief, recognition, then absolute horror. His hands fumbled with the keys to the handcuffs, suddenly desperate to remove them from Isabella's wrists. "Sir, we didn't know. She never identified herself as." "She shouldn't have to," Vincent interrupted, his voice still that dangerously quiet tone that was somehow more frightening than shouting. He moved past the officer and gently, so gently, turned Isabella to face him. His hands checked her face where it had been pressed against the table, examined her wrists where the handcuffs had bitten into her skin, and his jaw clenched tighter with each mark he found. Isabella collapsed into her father's arms, finally allowing herself to break down completely. All the strength she'd been holding on to, all the dignity she'd tried to maintain, crumbled as she sobbed into his shoulder. "Dad, I didn't do anything. I was just trying to do my job, and she started yelling, and they wouldn't listen to me, and nobody believed me in." "Sure, I know, baby. I know. I'm here now. You're safe." Vincent held his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world, because to him, she was. His eyes swept the cafe, taking in every detail, every face, memorizing everyone who'd stood by and watched his child be humiliated. The blonde woman had backed herself into a corner, her expensive handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. She was frantically scrolling through her phone, probably searching for information about Vincent Rodriguez, probably realizing with mounting horror exactly how powerful the man standing before her actually was. One of Vincent's security personnel approached him and spoke quietly. "Sir, we've contacted local authorities. The chief of police is on his way. We've also secured the cafe. No one leaves until we have statements from everyone." Vincent nodded. Then he looked at Officer Brennan, who was now sweating visibly. "I want your badge number. I want the names of every officer who responded to this call. And I want to know exactly what probable cause you had to assault my daughter." "Sir, we responded to a disturbance call. The woman said she'd been threatened. Did you investigate the claim? Did you ask for witnesses? Did you review any evidence before putting your hands on a young woman who was simply trying to do her job?" Brennan opened his mouth, then closed it. They all knew the answer. No investigation. No witnesses questioned. Just immediate belief in the word of a well-dressed white woman over a Hispanic waitress in a cheap uniform. "That's what I thought," Vincent said coldly. That's when Riley stepped forward again, her phone still in her hand. "Mr. Rodriguez? I recorded everything. From the beginning. Before the police even arrived." Vincent turned to the teenager, and his expression softened slightly. "You recorded it?" "Yes, sir. I have the whole thing. The lady yelling at your daughter, making up lies about being threatened, everything the officers did." Riley's voice wavered, but she held her ground. "Nobody else was doing anything to help, so I thought someone needed to show the truth." Vincent walked over to Riley and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "What's your name?" "Riley, sir. Riley Chun." "Riley, you are incredibly brave. Do you know that? Braver than every adult in this room who chose to look away." He glanced meaningfully at the silent customers, and many of them had the decency to look ashamed. "Can you send me that video?" Riley nodded quickly. "Of course. Should I email it or?" "My assistant will give you the information." Vincent gestured to one of his team, who immediately approached Riley with a business card. Then Vincent raised his voice so everyone in the cafe could hear. "That video is going to be reviewed by my lawyers. It's going to be reviewed by federal investigators. And it's going to be released to the media because the world needs to see exactly how quickly justice fails when people make assumptions based on appearance." The blonde woman finally found her voice, though it came out shaky and desperate. I didn't know who she was. If I'd known she was your daughter, I never would have." Vincent's head snapped toward her so fast that she flinched. That's the problem right there. You're saying if you'd known she was my daughter, you would have treated her differently. But what about everyone else? What about every waitress, every service worker, every person you encounter who doesn't have a powerful father to protect them? Do they deserve to be treated like dirt because nobody will defend them? The woman's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She had no answer because there was no good answer. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the cafe. This incident is going to be investigated thoroughly. The officers involved will face review. This establishment will be examined for its failure to protect an employee. And you, he pointed at the blonde woman, will be identified in every news story about this. Your name, your face, your actions. Because people need to know what prejudice looks like, what cruelty looks like, what happens when someone abuses the police as a weapon against people they consider beneath them. Tom, the manager, finally found his voice. Mr. Rodriguez, sir, I'm so sorry. I should have stepped in. I should have defended Isabella. I was scared, Anne. You were scared. Vincent's voice dripped with contempt. My daughter was being assaulted by police officers, and you were scared? What exactly were you afraid of? Losing your job. Because you're about to lose it anyway for failing to protect your employee. Isabella stirred in her father's arms, pulling back slightly. Her face was blotchy from crying, her uniform wrinkled and stained, but her eyes held a new determination. Dad, wait. Everyone turned to look at her. I don't want this to just be about me, Isabella said, her voice hoarse but steady. I don't want people to care about what happened just because I'm your daughter. I want them to care because this happens every single day to people who don't have protection, who don't have power, who don't have anyone to call when things go wrong. Vincent's expression softened as he looked at his daughter, pride mixing with the anger still simmering in his chest. Then what do you want, sweetheart? Tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen. Isabella took a deep breath and looked around the cafe at all the faces watching her, waiting to see what the billionaire's daughter would demand. And what she said next would echo far beyond that small town, far beyond that moment. Isabella stood in the center of that cafe, surrounded by security personnel, police officers, terrified customers, and her powerful father, and she made a choice that would define not just her own story, but the stories of countless others. I want justice, she said clearly. But not just for me. I want every single person in this town, in this country, to understand what happened here today. Not because I'm Vincent Rodriguez's daughter, but because I'm a human being who deserved to be treated with dignity. Just like every other person working in service jobs, every other person who's been judged by their appearance, every other person whose truth has been ignored. She turned to face the blonde woman directly, and though Isabella's eyes were still red from crying, her gaze was steady and strong. You used the police like a weapon against me because you thought I was powerless. You thought nobody would care about a waitress. And you know what? You were almost right. Not one person in this cafe spoke up for me except for a 15-year-old girl who was braver than all the adults combined. The blonde woman's face crumbled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up cheeks, but Isabella wasn't finished. I forgive you, Isabella said, and the words seemed to shock everyone in the room. I forgive you because I want you to live with what you did. I want you to remember this moment every single day. I want you to think about how easily you tried to destroy someone's life over a coffee order. And I want you to change, to be better, to see people as human beings instead of as obstacles to whatever you want. Then Isabella turned to Officer Brennan. And you didn't ask questions. You didn't investigate. You saw a Hispanic woman in a waitress uniform and a well-dressed white woman, and you made an instant decision about who was telling the truth. That's not police work. That's prejudice with a badge. Brennan's face was ashen. Miss Rodriguez, I apologize. If I'd known. Stop, Isabella interrupted. Don't apologize for not knowing who I am. Apologize for not treating me like a human being regardless of who I am. Apologize to every person you've ever treated this way who didn't have a billionaire father to defend them. Apologize to every victim of your assumptions who's sitting in a jail cell right now because their truth didn't matter as much as someone else's lies. The cafe was absolutely silent except for the sound of Riley's phone still recording every word. Vincent watched his daughter with tears in his own eyes now. This was why he'd let her go into the world despite his fears. This strength, this wisdom, this compassion even in the face of injustice, this was who Isabella truly was. Not because of his money or his name, but because of her own beautiful heart. Here's what's going to happen, Isabella continued, addressing the whole cafe now. This video that Riley recorded is going to be shared everywhere. Not to shame anyone beyond what they deserve, but to start a conversation. To make people understand that this isn't rare. This isn't unusual. This happens in cities and towns across the country every single day. The only difference is that I had someone powerful enough to make people pay attention. She looked at her father. Dad, I want to start a foundation. Using the experience I gained here, working alongside people who struggle every day. I want to help service workers who face discrimination. I want to fund legal defense for people who can't afford to fight back when they're treated unfairly. I want to train police officers on de-escalation and investigating claims instead of jumping to conclusions. And I want to partner with young people like Riley who have the courage to speak truth even when adults won't. Vincent smiled through his tears. Consider it done. Whatever you need, however much it takes. Riley burst into tears herself, overwhelmed by everything happening. Her mother wrapped her arms around her daughter, finally understanding that Riley's bravery had been the right choice, even when it felt scary. In the weeks that followed, Isabella's story exploded across every news platform, every social media site, every conversation happening in America. The video Riley recorded was watched millions of times. Officer Brennan and his colleagues were suspended pending investigation. The blonde woman's name did indeed become public, and she faced such intense public criticism that she eventually released a tearful apology video, though many questioned whether she was truly sorry or just sorry she'd been caught. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was what came after. The Isabella Rodriguez Foundation launched just 1 month later with more funding and support than anyone expected. Service workers across the country shared their own stories of discrimination, of being treated as less than human, of having their truth dismissed. Police departments began implementing new training programs. Businesses reviewed their policies on protecting employees from abusive customers. And Riley, the teenage girl who'd simply done the right thing when no one else would? She became a youth ambassador for the foundation, traveling to schools and community centers, encouraging other young people to speak up against injustice, to record the truth, to be brave even when adults around them chose silence. As for Isabella, she didn't return to the cafe. Not because of shame, but because her path had changed. She'd gotten what she wanted, a real understanding of how the world worked for people without power. And now she was using her privilege not to escape that reality, but to change it. 6 months after that terrible morning, Isabella stood on a stage at a national conference on social justice, facing thousands of people, and she told her story one more time. But she ended it differently than anyone expected. That day in the cafe was the worst and best day of my life, she said. It was the worst because I experienced firsthand how quickly human dignity can be stolen. But it was the best because it showed me my purpose. I'm not just Vincent Rodriguez's daughter. I'm not just a former waitress. I'm someone who understands both worlds. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life building bridges between them, making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else if I can help it. The audience rose in thunderous applause. And somewhere in that crowd, Riley sat with her mother, recording on her phone once again, but this time capturing hope instead of injustice, courage instead of cruelty, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the most powerful revolutions start with the smallest acts of bravery. Because in the end, it wasn't wealth that changed everything. It wasn't power or influence or fame. It was one girl's determination to be treated with dignity, and another girl's courage to show the world what really happened when dignity was denied. That's what changed everything. And that's a story worth remembering.